So welcome everyone. This is a conversation that was started by the group out of a discussion that universities sometimes require students to give timetables and feedback and on what they're going to do when, especially happens in the doctoral world, and that can be hard to do. But I had a conversation with a master's dean, and he says this, so I know I want this conversation to be bracketed for both master's and doctoral work. This dean tells me that while most doctoral students finish their coursework and then spend full time for the next 3 or 4 years doing research, or some of you would know part-time, masters are completing 45 quarter units, 3 semester units, 30 semester units. So they're taking courses throughout their 2 years. Then they also have to balance, how do I keep up with courses and try to do some research at the same time? And they haven't transitioned from research being a lab where you just work for a few hours to what it's like when you're doing it at home and it's in everything else. So that's a tough timetable for that process. And then on top, some quality of life and perhaps a club activity, and you get easily overwhelmed. So this is the norm at Cal Poly, is for graduate students to do a summer internship rather than stay and work on their thesis research. Most faculty advisors are not paid to be here in the summer, and as such, they're teaching loads and union contractor for 9 months. That makes it harder for the students to get with their supervisors. In addition, writing skills in general for master's students can be poor, so you have to learn to upgrade your skills at the same time you're learning to do the thesis, and to write a thesis like a lab report and then having to do it over and over and over again is a problem. And finally, just to tack on this list of why people have difficulty in graduate school, many advisors are not good at defining objectives. And for a master's thesis that is reasonable out, after all, they only have experience managing doctoral thesis work. So students rarely achieve their original objectives. It's a challenge for both the advisor and the student to realize the fundamental discover is not normally achievable in a master's thesis. So how to get the scope of work just right. So these are big issues. And Adrian, actually, there wasn't a handout for this. I see you in the room and asking for a handout. There isn't a handout for this. Although when I finish talking, I'll upload these slides if you want them, no problem. So, yes, people get behind meeting their timetables. Graduate work has a lot to it, and that's the discussion for today. Now, I just want to have a little conversation about this cute little guy over on the top left. He's an orris, and we will see in the course of these group works that we have a lot of creatures over in that top left. What they have in common with each other is they are the slowest creatures on Earth. And that's to say that this group work, the need for group work, developed out of an ongoing group that we used to call the lingerers. And it was originally for people who had been at their doctoral work longer than they wanted. And we came to the realization that everyone they came up with, worked with me over December, and we had a great list of the things that need to be discussed, and there are things everybody should discuss. So we opened up this idea of group for everyone. But a special kudos to Adrian and Jane and Sally Ann, who sometimes co-host at the student level, and who've been with me trying to figure out how one-on-one kind of support can morph in a digital environment to be useful to graduate students. So you're all very welcome. So a little bit about the group work. It's student and or professor led. In the spring of 2019, it'll be mostly professor led, although there's 2 or 3 weeks where I'll ask for some student help due to travel. It's going to be on Mondays after the main webinar that I do, and that's just because it's the one day of the week that I can be here the most. There will be pre-reading materials most of the time. That did not happen this week. Those pre-reading materials will be up in a room that we have. So in between the group sessions, there is a Google Classroom, and you sign into Google Classroom, and right now you want to copy and paste NVG540. Sign into Google Classroom, and that will give you a place of where notices are, what conversations are going on in between. Give you a chance to get to know each other a little better, or be able to ask a momentary question in the middle of the week and get some kind of answer. So there's a lot of good practice there. Every week there's a topic. It's a discussion. It's not an expert webinar similar to what I do first. This is more a discussion, and it's built on some reflective practice. And then one of the things that makes a group good is if you are willing to tell each other where you are and what you want to do next, other people will watch and see whether or not you do it. And all of us are stars here, all of us trying to help everybody succeed. So we are a very safe place to have that kind of accountability move on, because we're not hooked to anybody's campus, and it doesn't show up in other ways. So I'm asking you now to take a moment in your chat, introduce yourself, and just basically, where are you in the world and what's the degree you're working on? So people can feel comfortable that they have a sense. If you want to say how many years you've been at your degree, or what your topic is, it's all good. And you can turn on your microphones. You have them available, or you can type. Oh, it says the code isn't valid. Okay, Sherry, we will address that. In fact, while you're all typing, I'll go into the classroom and see if that code is still the one I get. You can, in the classroom, set your notifications, by the way. It's really handy to have them so that they come to your emails, and you can kind of track conversations when you want to jump in. Okay, so it says that the class code is right, and I'll type it in here so you can copy and paste it. Yep, okay. We're all copying, pasting the same thing. All right, let's see what we've got. Matthew from the US, College Station. Oh, very good. And you, Matthew, I have good news for, and I have a question for as well. The good news is that TAMU we've passed all the hoops that are in part of a university that's as large as yours. And 12 days after you start campus, which I think is a week from now, maybe 2 weeks from now, I get a list of all the students, and you have access to doctoralnet.com. So any of the tools here that have to do with the site and other things, soon you will have access to. And biotech, fabulous. Glad to have some STEM people join us. And the code didn't work for you either. And you put it in class code because both of us just went into the classroom and copied the same code out. So we'll sort that out as we go. Sherry, EDD, second year's Appalachian State. You started today, I think. Is that right? Or is it next week, Sherry? That you maybe next week you start. And we're looking next week. Excellent. Well, thank you. And glad you joined us in the meantime. And education is my background. So that's always fun for me to have other education people. But it really doesn't make a lot of difference. You're going to find that no matter what your topic is, you will all have similar problems with each other. Sally Ann, EDD also, but in the UK, very different system than you in the US. So she'll get that apart. She's been at it 10 years, doing a heuristic study considering her own and the children's research of children's experience in school. Jane, also an educator, also out of the US, Canada, University of British Columbia, PhD this time, hoping to wrap up. Yes, and we're here to see what we can do to make that easier. In fact, today's topic came from Jane. Gary, an Irish person, working part-time in PhD, full-time in pharmaceutical work. That's a tough mix. PhD in human resource management and organizational behavior. So a business person, also hoping to wrap up sometime, but later on in 2019. So a good group, a good variety, and the variety changes. And as I said, you're going to see that there's more similarities than differences. So our topic this week, just for a short discussion, is planning. I'm hoping that you will jump in on your prior experience and tools. We started to talk about why master's students have trouble, but those ideas are similar for doctoral students. Advisors being in a different place than you are. Some of you work. Advisors often have never worked and certainly didn't work when they got their degree. Just things are different. World is different. Tools are different. And people don't always know how to help each other. What we do with these topics is we have 3 types of content. When possible, we'll try to hit all 3. So what are the practical tools for having planning? What is the cognitive content around planning that might be helpful to help you understand some relationships in a new way? And what are the attitudinal content? What one of the people who comes calls the hidden curricula of academic life that can be done to make this portion of your world easier. And all of this is especially when you're being asked to set timetables for something you've never done before. So how do you know what that does? So practical tools. The most practical tool to get done is backwards mapping. And I say that with such fervent because I wouldn't have gotten my doctoral degree from Teachers College in 3 years if it hadn't have been for a backwards map that one of my professors took us through at the beginning of year 2. So I'd had a year of school, we were all kind of cruising along, and he said, okay, so you think you want to get done in 3 years, let's see what that takes. And he started with, you want to graduate December 2000, let's say 19. So I'll run you back this year. If you want to graduate this year, you should have your data. And then it would look kind of like this. You want to have your final doc in by December, which means that you need to have your final doc in to other people by November, which means that you need to have your final doc written by October, because the last 2 months, and this is always a big, nasty piece for people, it takes much longer at the end game than you expect. People have to read it, people have to comment, you have editors you have to track down. Some do very well managing. I'm going to get my edits. I'm going to make my changes. I'm going to have the copy editor take care of it. It's going to go on to my supervisor. but it takes a lot of management to get that done. So let's say October, you've got it done. All right, that means that you've got you're writing your introductory chapter in September. Even if you've written it 3 times before, you're going to want to rewrite it because it's what gets them going, and you want it to be really good. And you want to say all the things you want to say. So that's September. That means summer is your discussions, and means your findings is your spring. Everything goes backwards from there. And all that's general, but that's how backwards mapping works. It tries to help you unpack the places where you might not have enough time planned in if you are under a challenge. So we'll deal with those as questions later. Another practical tool is to align your goals with your plan, track your habits, find and build a support network, and then constantly reflect and correct. That's the basic structure of most planning tools. Evernote, if you use it as a tool, which I do, it's a really good set of templates, and I've given you the structure. There's also the Eisenhower matrix, which asks you to look at everything that comes across your plate as to whether or not it's important, whether it has to do with your personal goals and it's important, whether it's unimportant, and so you look up the Eisenhower matrix and then you plot in what goes in what matrix. Things on the bottom row that aren't so important, you probably lose when you're trying to get some thesis work done. And the things on the top, you need to continually doing what's important to you, not just what's important to other people. That's how it works, but it's a very useful tool as well. Cognitive resources. These 3 are from Mind Tools, which is one of the subscriptions I maintain, largely because it's helpful for this work. But Mind Tools is a very good organization, and they do very excellent bite-sized reading. And they have something on the planning cycle for medium-sized projects, actions plans, when you want to do small-scale planning, like this 2 weeks, I'm going to do this little bit of work. And then scheduling when you have too many things hitting your calendar at once. And all of those links I tested without being signed in, so I think they will work for you as well. Okay, I'm almost done. Attitudes are what keep us sane when we have too much on our plate. And as a founder and owner of a small business, I can tell you that it's as bad on my side of the fence as it was when I was a doctoral student. And it's just really a matter of how do we hold our heads. So for you as a doctoral student, if you are a doctoral student, there is a milestone checklist where Dr. Marie and I broke out the entire doctoral journey. It's worth taking a look to make sure that you've got all the small milestones and you know where you are. And then the ones that you can't say you know where you are, you might just be aware of, because those might be little holes you'll trip in later. And we are here during this kind of group for you to ask questions. So there's also motivation is an issue to keep our attitudes square. And Margie does the motivational emails 365 days a year. You get a motivational email. You don't have to open it, of course, but when you open it, there's some treats for you. And they're not just motivation, they're thought-provoking. They have to do with getting jobs, all kinds of things that are part of your journey. And then, of course, group work. And so you can ask any question here. And we're hoping that after I finish talking, you'll ask things like, how long does it take to do such and such that you need to do, and we can have some conversation. So I'm going to just say, because I'm going to cut off the recording, that for those who might have watched this later by recording, there's always good reflection work on what this means to us and what we should take from this session. That'll be a conversation that the people in the room will have after I turn off the recording. And next steps, it's useful to use a group like this to plan what are you going to do and then to help each other get there. So with that, I'm turning off the recording, if that big marker will let me.